The presidential race is in high gear in New Hampshire. Our presidential contenders series continues this week with Texas Senator Ted Cruz. He'll discuss his win in Iowa, the Trump factor, and much more. And later, Matt SCHLAPP of the American Conservative Union will analyze the primaries and the candidates. And finally, the EU recognizes ISIS's atrocities in the Middle East as genocide. Will it have any effect? Anti-terrorism expert Dr. WALID PHARES is here. An important World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Senator Ted Cruz, Matt SCHLAPP, and WALID PHARES are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show or if you have a question, I'll be live tweeting throughout. Find me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo, or you can email me at worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get to it. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. The Republican presidential field is beginning to take shape. Senator Ted Cruz's win in Monday's Iowa caucus solidified his standing as a top-tier candidate. He, Donald Trump, and Marco Rubio, with his better-than-expected third-place showing, lead the field. In New Hampshire, Trump commands a huge lead in the latest tracking polls. Some have him standing at 36%. Rubio has edged into second place ahead of Cruz. Making their last stands are the governors, Jeb Bush, John Kasich, and Chris Christie. More with Senator Cruz about his Iowa win, Donald Trump's charges of voter fraud, and Cruz's strategy for New Hampshire in our next segment. And on the Democratic side, it is a race indeed. After Hillary Clinton's squeaker in Iowa, which was won by a coin toss, literally, Bernie Sanders holds a double-digit lead in New Hampshire. The candidates have now agreed to a new series of debates, including Thursday's face-off in Durham, New Hampshire. During a town hall-style forum on Wednesday, both sides continued their ongoing argument over who is more committed to and capable of carrying out a progressive agenda on health care, income inequality, and workers' rights. Back on Capitol Hill, the United States House on Tuesday failed to override President Barack Obama's veto of legislation that would have repealed key provisions of Obamacare and stripped federal funding from Planned Parenthood. The 241 to 186 vote fell short of the two-thirds needed, ensuring that the Affordable Care Act will remain in place. Still, Speaker Paul Ryan repeated the GOP pledge to end Obamacare in time.
This fight will not end here. We have now forged a path that is a clear path to repealing Obamacare without 60 votes in the Senate. So what we are proving today, that is, if we have a Republican president next year, we will repeal Obamacare.
President Obama on Wednesday came to the defense of Muslim Americans, saying he wants to correct what he called a hugely distorted impression of them. Obama made the comments during his first visit as president to an American mosque. In an address Wednesday at the Islamic Society of Baltimore, the president said those who demonize all Muslims for the acts of a few terrorists are playing into extremist hands.
This is a time of concern and, frankly, a time of some fear. Like all Americans, you're worried about the threat of terrorism. You also have another concern, and that is your entire community so often is targeted or blamed for the violent acts of the very few.
The president went on to decry the inexcusable political rhetoric against Muslims, an apparent reference to Donald Trump's terror concerns. More on this later in the show. Meanwhile, terror attacks continue abroad. At least 60 people were killed and dozens wounded on Sunday by a car bomb and two suicide bombers in Damascus. Muslims adjacent to Syria's holiest Shia shrine were targeted. The Islamic State claimed responsibility. The attack occurred as Syria's government and its divided opposition convened in Geneva for the first UN-mediated peace talks. The UN is aiming for 6 months of talks, first to seek a ceasefire and later to hammer out a political settlement for Syria. The nearly 5-year conflict has killed more than 250,000 people and driven more than 10 million from their homes. Pope Francis is taking fire this week for some laudatory comments he made about the communist regime in China. The Pope expressed both respect for and awe of China, its culture, and its role in the world in an interview with the Hong Kong online daily Asia Times. The Holy Father called China a reference point of greatness. He made no mention of China's human rights abuses or its one-child policy, and he chose not to address any of the restrictions placed on the Catholic Church or address the missing and imprisoned clergy currently in China. Vatican journalist Sandro Magister called the Pope's comments realpolitik pushed to the extreme and lamented his total silence on religious freedom. On Tuesday, Pope Francis concluded the year of consecrated life, calling on those who have taken their solemn vows to make courageous and prophetic choices. Speaking to some 4,000 consecrated men and women during a Mass at St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope encouraged them to get their hands dirty and to walk to the geographical and existential outskirts of mankind. He declared the year an occasion for renewal and thanksgiving for the service of sisters, brothers, priests, and nuns, as well as an invitation to young Catholics to consider religious vocations. And the European Bishops' Conference is wading into Britain's political debate about whether to remain in the European Union. The General Secretary of the conference, Father Patrick Daly, said this week, "It has to be clear by reflecting the social teachings of the Catholic Church, the most cautious commentator is bound to want the UK to remain in the EU." He emphatically added, quote, "The UK is a member of our family," and he urged Brits to vote to stay and get friends to do the same. The UK referendum is expected in 2017. And in a landmark decision, Britain gave scientists approval on Monday to conduct gene editing experiments on human embryos. The decision by Britain's Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority marks the first time a country's national regulator has approved the technique. Gene editing involves deleting, repairing, or replacing bits of DNA inside living cells in a biological cut-and-paste technique. Embryos would be destroyed after 7 days. Now, scientists say, as they said of embryonic stem cell research in the past, that gene editing could one day lead to treatments for an array of conditions. Critics warn that tweaking the genetic code is the first step to creating designer babies, where not only inherited diseases are avoided, but taller, stronger, smarter, or better-looking children could be sought by parents. And back in the U.S., more good news for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Fresh off their national championship win in football against Clemson last month, University of Alabama Catholics are getting a new student center, and it bears the name of their esteemed coach, Nick Saban. The St. Francis of Assisi campus parish broke ground this week on the 4,600 square foot center for Catholic students. The new building will serve the almost 3,000 Catholics on the Tuscaloosa campus. Coach Saban said that of all the legacies he leaves behind, the Catholic Center will be the one that will touch many lives in a positive ways over the years. Roll Tide. And Italy's most popular saint is going on the road. The remains of St. Padre Pio, the Capuchin mystic who died in 1968, left San Giovanni Rotondo for Rome this week. Pope Francis wanted St. Pio's body to be displayed in St. Peter's Basilica during the Jubilee Year of Mercy. Padre Pio spent most of his life hearing confessions and exhibited signs of the stigmata, the wounds of Christ. He was canonized in 2002. In 2008, the saint's body was exhumed and partially reconstructed in a climate-controlled glass reliquary. For many, he is an icon of mercy and will be displayed in the crystal coffin at the Vatican for the faithful to venerate. And speaking of reliquaries, I want to give you a chance to win a type of reliquary, I guess. The good folks at Random House Kids, the publishers of my forthcoming middle grade book, Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, have created a beautiful, special, limited edition box for review copies of the book, and I thought you might like to have one. Now, this is sure to be the epic must-read middle grade title of the spring. You and your children or your grandchildren are going to love this adventure. To win one of these specialty boxes, all you have to do is go to my Twitter or Facebook accounts and retweet or post the message about the book contest, and you will instantly be registered. I'll select 10 winners at random. You can also email me at raymond@raymondarroyo.com. If you don't have Twitter or Facebook, you can include your contact info and put Will Wilder Contest in the subject line. Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, the first of the Will Wilder series, hits bookstores March 8th. But it's available now for pre-order at the EWTN Religious Catalog or wherever books are sold. Do pre-order now for a chance to win some other goodies in the days ahead, and I'll tell you about that. There's a link at raymondarroyo.com for pre-order and contest info. When we return, he's coming off a big win in Iowa, but he's under fire in New Hampshire. GOP presidential candidate Ted Cruz joins us in an exclusive when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there. You don't want to miss this.
Ted Cruz comes out with an ad that I'm in favor of Obamacare. Can you believe this? Just like he did with Carson, where Carson, he said, left Iowa. He's out of the race. Vote for him. Did you hear about this one? What kind of people are we dealing with these politicians? And made up, liar, honestly, and made up stories.
That was Donald Trump at a rally in New Hampshire referencing our next guest. Welcome back to The World Over. Joining us from New Hampshire, Hooksett, is the winner of the Iowa Caucuses, on the ground seeking to continue his momentum in the Granite State. Senator Ted Cruz, thank you for being here.
Raymond, it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Now, you heard Donald Trump. He says you engaged in some kind of voter fraud by disseminating the idea that Ben Carson was leaving the race. Folks in Iowa say people representing your campaign at Caucuses said Carson was out and they should shift their support to you. Should a new election take place? Should your results be nullified, as Donald Trump suggests?
Oh, look, Raymond, this is silliness. And you know, you understand, Donald is rattled. He had announced to the whole world he was going to win Iowa, and then he didn't. And he's very upset, and he keeps making more and more outlandish attacks and insults. That's fine. He's entitled to do that. But I'm not going to respond in kind. I'm not going to engage in a battle of insults with Donald or anybody else. His underlying charge is ridiculous. What happened was there was a public news reporting that Ben Carson, after Iowa, was not going on to New Hampshire, was not going on to South Carolina. Instead, he was headed home to Florida. And so our political team sent that out to our supporters. It was a public news report, and it was true. It was true and accurate. He, in fact, got on a plane and headed to Florida. So what Donald is doing here is he's trying to distract from the undeniable fact that when Iowans looked at his record, they realized that his record wasn't conservative. And, you know, it's interesting, the clip you played there. What he is taking issue with is his own position on Obamacare. What Donald has advocated for decades is European-style socialized medicine, essentially expanding Obamacare to put government in charge of your and my health care so that the federal government is in charge of the relationship between your doctor and you. I think that's fundamentally wrong, and there's a real difference on policy between Donald and me on this. If Donald is elected, He will expand Obamacare to put the government in charge of our doctors. If I'm elected, we will repeal every word of Obamacare, and that includes dismissing the case against the Little Sisters of the Poor, who right now are being persecuted under Obamacare because the federal government is trying to force the sisters to pay for abortion-inducing drugs. That's wrong, and that will end if I'm elected president.
Senator Cruz, Ben Carson is saying evangelicals should consider this whole fracas that Trump is raising about there might have been some voter fraud here in suggesting that he was leaving the race. He said today in D.C. this.
It's clear that there were people who tried to take advantage of a situation, who tried to distort information. There's no question about that. Senator Cruz told me that he was not aware of that when I talked to him, and that he did not agree with that kind of thing. And we'll wait and see what he does to demonstrate that.
So what are you going to do, Senator? Are you taking any action in your campaign just to put this thing to rest?
Oh, look, this is all silliness. Ben Carson is a good man. He's a decent and principled man. This is a bunch of political noise over sending a press report that was true and accurate. And I would note, Marco Rubio's campaign sent the very same press report. His supporters were doing the same thing. But there's a reason why Donald Trump and others are attacking me and not attacking Marco Rubio for doing the exact same thing. It's because we won. And the reason we won in Iowa is we saw that old Reagan coalition coming together. We saw conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians and Reagan Democrats, the working class, blue-collar Catholics across Iowa and across the country, and we're seeing that coalition come together. And the nature of politics, Raymond, you know well, that when you're winning, everyone else shoots at you, and what they try to do is they try to lob nasty and personal attacks. Well, listen, I'm not going to attack Donald Trump. I'm not going to attack Ben Carson or anybody else. I'm going to stay focused on substance and issues. And you know, the question that I would say Catholic voters should ask in this race is who has a proven record of standing up and defending life? Who has a proven record of standing up and defending marriage? And who has a proven record of standing up and defending religious liberty? I have spent literally my entire adult life fighting to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, fighting to defend religious liberty, and that's the reason so many people of faith are supporting our campaign, because they're tired of candidates that talk a good game on the trail and don't do what they say. I'll tell you, Raymond, if I'm elected president on the first day in office, I will direct the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any and all criminal violations. And I will direct every agency in the federal government that the persecution of religious liberty ends today. And that's a big part of the reason why people of faith and conservatives are uniting behind our campaign.
I want to ask you about, you mentioned religious freedom, religious liberty. The president visited a Baltimore mosque yesterday, a mosque that has previous ties to some terror suspects. He said there that an attack on one religion is an attack on all religions. And he went on to characterize Republicans, and I imagine he would include you in that number, as somehow being bystanders to bigotry. Your reaction to that visit and those comments?
Well, listen, unfortunately, President Obama is so out of touch right now with the challenges facing this country, and sadly, so is Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. All three of them refuse even to say the words radical Islamic terrorism. The most important determination any voter is making in this election is who's best prepared to be commander-in-chief, who has the experience, who has the judgment, who has the clarity of vision and the strength of resolve to keep this country safe. We are facing a war against radical Islamic terrorism. It is Islamism, is a perversion of Islam. It is a theocratic and political philosophy that mandates of its adherents that they wage jihad and that they either murder or forcibly convert infidels, by which they mean all of us. And we need a president who confronts it, who is willing to acknowledge it exists, and in particular has the clarity of vision and strength to defeat it. If I'm elected president, we will defeat radical Islamic terrorism. We will utterly and completely destroy ISIS. Sadly, the president, rather than being a firm commander-in-chief, rather than keeping this country safe, instead, over and over again, he acts as an apologist for radical Islamic terrorism. You know, I'm reminded of the prayer breakfast a year ago where President Obama spoke, and it was right after, you'll recall, a Jordanian pilot had been lit on fire by ISIS. And in fact, the King of Jordan was scheduled to be at the National Prayer Breakfast, but he had to fly back because of the pilot. President Obama got up and spoke, and he gave a speech and said, well, yes, ISIS is doing bad things like crucifying Christians and beheading children and lighting people on fire. But he said, you know what, Christians and Jews have done bad things too, and he invoked the Inquisition and the Crusades. Now, the last I checked, the Crusades were over centuries ago. And I don't think it is asking too much for the President of the United States to stay within the current millennium. And the reason I use the word apologist is a strong word, but it has a very precise meaning. It means someone that gives an explanation, a rationalization, a justification for the actions. And I would note the radical Islamic terrorists, that's what they invoke, is the Crusades and the Inquisition. All of us, if Christians were murdering others because of their faith, we would speak out against it. If Jews were murdering others because of their faith, we would speak out against it. And it is profoundly harmful when the President of the United States refuses to acknowledge the evil of radical Islamic terrorism and instead stands up and makes excuses and justifications for it. It makes this country a lot less safe.
Senator Cruz, I have to play something for you. A lot of our viewers sent me emails about this comment. This is you, I guess it's about 2 months ago, at a rally. Here's what you said.
I have never met anybody, any conservative who wants to ban contraceptives. As I noted, Heidi and I, we have 2 little girls. I'm very glad we don't have 17. Last I checked, we don't have a rubber shortage in America.
Now, some larger families took offense at that statement. They say it's less than pro-life. Your reaction?
Well, listen, I come from a family where my grandmother, my mother's mother, was the second youngest of 17 kids. And so the point that I was making there, and that's a little snippet that's taken out of context, is in the last elections, the Democratic Party raised this specter of the war on women, and it was a political attack that was deliberately deceptive. And what they suggested to people is that there were politicians trying to take away your birth control. Now, I would note, and this is something that should be encouraging to all of us who are pro-life, the Democrats didn't wage that fight on the issue of life. On the issue of life, we are winning. This country is becoming more and more pro-life. People's hearts and minds are being changed. I am unequivocally pro-life. I think every life is a precious gift from God that needs to be protected from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. But the Democrats didn't wage that battle on the issue of life. Instead, they did it on contraceptives, and it was deliberately deceptive. They were trying to scare young women into thinking some politician is going to come take their birth control away from them. And a point I was making through humor, and humor is often a very effective way to communicate, is that nobody was talking about banning birth control for anyone. Now, listen, I recognize that many people, many faithful Catholics, for religious reasons, don't use birth control. That is obviously their right to follow the teachings of their faith. I'm a Southern Baptist. That is not the teaching of my faith, but I respect those observant Catholics who follow that teaching. But nobody is suggesting banning birth control. And indeed, the point that I made going on is what this issue was about was the Little Sisters of the Poor. And this is, I talk about the Little Sisters all over the country. I talk every day. Because as you know, the Little Sisters of the Poor are a Catholic charity. They devote their lives to caring for the poor and the elderly.
Yeah.
And right now today, the Obama administration is litigating against the Little Sisters of the Poor, trying to impose millions of dollars of fines on the sisters under Obamacare in order to force the sisters to pay for abortion-inducing drugs and others. Now, that is wrong. That will end if I'm elected president, and that's what the whole issue is. And so that illustration I was using was showing that the Democrats were deliberately distorting the issue to confuse people and mislead them, and we need to speak the truth and do it with a smile.
Senator, before I let you go, because I know you have got a ton of events today and I don't want to slow you up, what is the strategy in New Hampshire? We saw polls don't always come out as they're projected, as you demonstrated in Iowa. Now, in New Hampshire currently, Trump is in one poll at 38%, in another at 36%. You were between 13% and 14%. How do you close the gap, and what do you have to do here to be a success in your mind?
Well, listen, the strategy is to continue to reassemble the old Reagan coalition, to bring together conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians and Reagan Democrats. And I think the central issue in this election, people are tired of getting burned. We keep winning elections. And the people we elect, they go to Washington and they don't do what they said. And that's happened over and over and over again. And I think the stakes facing this country, they've never been higher. And so how do we differentiate? How do we avoid getting burned again? And you know, the scriptural test is you shall know them by their fruits. What I would suggest to everyone is that you don't listen to what any of the candidates say. You don't listen to our campaign promises, because we've seen too many campaign conservatives that suddenly claim to be a conservative when they're on the campaign trail, but when they get to Washington, they don't honor their commitments. Instead, we need to look to our walk. You know, if a candidate says they support the right to life, every Republican claims that, we should ask, show me where you stood up and fought to defend the right to life. I have a record for 2 decades fighting to defend the right to life. As Solicitor General of Texas, I led a coalition of states in front of the U.S. Supreme Court defending the federal ban on partial birth abortion. And we won 5-4. I led a different coalition of states in front of the U.S. Supreme Court defending New Hampshire's law mandating parental notification. We won unanimously. And when the Texas legislature passed legislation banning taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood, a federal district court struck that down. I personally argued the case in the Court of Appeals. We won unanimously, reinstating that law and defunding Planned Parenthood. So if you want someone who will stand for life, don't listen to campaign promises, but instead ask who has walked the walk and defended life. The same is true for marriage. The same is true for religious liberty. The same is true for defending the Constitution, for defending our values, for standing up against Obamacare. And what we're seeing in New Hampshire and nationwide is that conservatives and constitutionalists are uniting behind our campaign, because I have spent decades fighting to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the stakes are too high for us to get it wrong.
Do you need to win New Hampshire?
Of course not. We've said from the beginning we have not viewed any of the early states as must win. There are a number of candidates who bet their entire campaign on either winning Iowa or winning New Hampshire. From day one, we said, listen, we've got a great team on the ground in each of the first 4 states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. We hope to do well in each of the first 4 states. We're going to work hard to earn as many votes as we can. But that's going to be up to the voters. And 10 days after South Carolina is Super Tuesday. It's the so-called SEC primary. It's Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. We've got an amazing team across Super Tuesday. So I hope and believe we'll do well in New Hampshire. I hope and believe we'll do well in South Carolina and Nevada. And then I very much believe we will do exceptionally well on Super Tuesday. But our strategy is based on the grassroots. We've got over 200,000 volunteers nationwide. You know, all the pundits said we would not win Iowa.
That's true.
The day before the Iowa caucuses, I watched the news. Everyone said Trump was going to win. And what happened was the voters had something different to say about it. It was a grassroots army. And we're coming out of Iowa with more money in the bank than any candidate in the race, because we've received over 800,000 contributions. It's got Washington terrified, because the strength of this campaign is the grassroots, and I'm working to earn the votes of men and women all across New Hampshire right now.
Senator Ted Cruz, thanks for being with us. We will be watching you out on the trail and looking for another surprise there. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. God bless.
When we return, Republican consultant Matt SCHLAPP will be here. We'll get his take on Iowa and his forecast for the rest of this wild and woolly political campaign when the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. He's the chairman of the American Conservative Union and a former deputy political director in the Bush White House to discuss the upcoming primaries and where this race could turn. Please welcome Matt SCHLAPP to the program. Matt, thanks for being here. A pleasure. I want to start. You heard Ted Cruz earlier. We discussed this fraud allegation that Trump has made against him. Ben Carson saying evangelicals should consider this when they're voting. Now, the emergence, we just learned, of these voicemail messages to Cruz staffers. How damaging is this to him among that base of evangelicals?
Well, whenever you have these types of things that come out in a campaign, you really have to get to the facts. And there's a lot of people out there who could have made these calls. It could have been something from some kind of a nonprofit or an outside group, but it also could be from the Cruz campaign. And so that's what they have to determine. If it's from the Cruz campaign and it's clearly something that's fraudulent, I think they got a problem.
Well, they said, he said earlier, and he's been saying,
Yeah.
we heard a report on CNN, we reported it.
Yeah.
There was no harm, no foul here. Others are seeing it differently.
I think when Ted Cruz came out and said, look, we made a mistake when we repeated this CNN report that Ben Carson was dropping out, I think he handled it perfectly. The question is, are there now more facts?
Yeah.
And let me tell you one thing about Ben Carson. He was not really suspending his campaign, but he kind of was suspending his campaign.
Yeah, he took a day off.
He took a day off. You know, he got some
Yeah.
clothes and he went to Florida, so that was a little bizarre too.
There's a new CNN poll, Trump 29, Rubio 18, Cruz 15 in New Hampshire. Now, there's a 6-point margin of error, so.
It's a big
That's
margin
a
of
big
error,
margin.
small sample.
Yeah, 300 people.
That's
so
right.
How much can we read into that? Who knows?
It's all about the trend.
Yep. I want to play something for you. This is Donald Trump today in New Hampshire. He's returning to the issues that propelled him to the top of the field. At one point, an immigration activist stood up and suggested that immigrants are the backbone of the country.
No, I don't think so. They're not the backbone. You know what? I'll tell you what. That's okay. We don't need help with these folks. Let me just tell you something. You know what the backbone of our country? People that came here, and they came here legally. People that came to this country legally, and they worked their ass, and they've made the country great. That's the backbone.
How does this play, Matt?
You know, I think that's actually kind of a beautiful answer. I mean, Mark Levin always says that we're not a country of immigrants. We're a country of people who used to be immigrants or are now Americans. And I think, look, I come from immigrants. It's a beautiful story. It's the American story.
Yeah.
But it's the American story. And I think if we can get that right, and I think Donald Trump connects to people who say, look, in the end of the day, we're all Americans.
We've heard so much about Donald Trump. I mean, he really has set the narrative for so much of this. When he came out of Iowa and began that tweet against Cruz saying he engaged in voter fraud, we should have a recount, I thought, the moment I saw it, forget whether the allegation is true or not true, now we're seeing other facts come forward.
Right.
Donald Trump is once again controlling the narrative and sending the media after him.
Yeah.
He always wins when this happens. He always stays at the top of the poll.
And he will go to a place that none of us would go.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, his judgment is right because it turns out to be true. Now, I don't know if this is going to turn out to be true, but he does have an instinct that is amazingly good in politics.
Yeah, I know. I've never seen anything like it, I dare say you haven't either. I want to talk about Marco Rubio. Marco is jockeying now with Ted Cruz for the number 2 spot in New Hampshire. He's positioning himself as the person best poised to defeat Hillary Clinton in the fall.
There is a reason why Hillary Clinton attacks me 5 times for every time they attack any other Republican. Because she doesn't want to run against me, but I can't wait to run against her.
What's happening with Marco Rubio? Can he use Iowa to propel himself? He's in the number 2 spot. How long can he sustain that, given the fire he's under?
Look, I think when you look at these polls, people look at the ballot. They want to see what numerical value each candidate has. But what you really want to look at in polls are the trends and the characteristics voters are looking for. Marco's on a great uphill trajectory, and that can he keep it going? That's the big question. The real point, though, is that Marco actually hurts Trump as he grows. A lot of people are assuming he's hurting Ted Cruz, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I have to share this with you. Digging into that CNN poll, and this is interesting, Trump has also been ruled out by more likely voters than any Republican in the field. 37% say they would never vote for him. Cruz is second on the score, with 13% saying they'd never vote for him, followed by Bush at 7%. Rubio probably benefits from that as well.
Oh, there's no question. And I think it is true that the Hillary Clinton folks do fear Marco Rubio's ability to pull in voters that the Republican Party has a little trouble with. I think they also know Donald Trump could do that, too. Who do they really want to run against? I think they really want to run against Ted Cruz. I think they feel like he's more boxed in terms of where he can go.
And they can demonize him easier. I have to play this for you. Bush, Kasich, and Chris Christie have been pounding Marco Rubio coming out of Iowa. Governor Christie called him the boy in the bubble, which only you and I realized was the John Travolta movie.
Right.
We're aged here. But now he's released an ad featuring Rick Santorum, who just endorsed Rubio the other day. Watch this.
What do you list as Marco Rubio's top accomplishment that made you decide to endorse him?
There's a guy who's been able to, number one, win a tough election in Florida.
Can you name his top accomplishment?
My feeling on Marco is someone who has tremendous potential, tremendous gifts. I guess it's hard to say their accomplishments. I mean, what you
name one thing that he's passed?
The Republicans have been a majority for 1 year and 1 month, of which, as you know, he was running for president primarily.
Well, just one. Just one that Marco achieved, maybe a bill that he wrote.
Jeb Bush ran Florida. Donald Trump built a company. Marco Rubio finished the sentence.
You can't point to him and say, well, nothing got done, and therefore he has no accomplishments. So this is a bogus argument.
All I'm asking is a simple question. List one accomplishment that Marco Rubio has achieved in 4 years in the United States Senate.
The bottom line is there isn't a whole lot of accomplishments, Joe, and I just don't think it's a fair question.
I'm Chris Christie, and I approve this message.
Wow. I mean, it is ugly out there.
That's right.
Ugly. How does this land on the ears and eyes of New Hampshire voters? Are they looking for someone with accomplishments who can really, or does Marco's fresh face and the promise, is that enough to get him over the line?
New Hampshire has often run some version of the man walks in the snow and leaves no tracks. That's a hard thing for Rick Santorum because wherever Rick Santorum goes, he leaves tons of tracks and gets tons of and got tons of things done in the Senate.
Yeah.
So this was a moment of honesty. But remember, the political moment is not about the years you've spent in the Senate getting things done. Our political moment today is, will you go into Washington with little experience and take a 2x4 to it? And that's who they want. That's why the experience meter is low this cycle. The longer you've served in office, the less likely they want you.
Interesting. I got to play this. Jeb Bush, the presumptive leader when this started, the man with the biggest ability to raise money, a good man, a proven track record, a conservative track record in Florida. If you want experience, as someone told me, if you like Marco Rubio, you're going to love Jeb Bush. This guy actually ran a state and did everything. Yet, this is Governor Bush in New Hampshire. Watch.
I won't be a divider-in-chief or an agitator-in-chief. I won't be out there blowharding, talking a big game without backing it up. I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country, to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
Is this the end of Governor Bush? Are we seeing the end of his?
We're going to see how he does in New Hampshire. My guess is that we're going to see how he does in South Carolina. And then I think he's going to have to make a real tough decision based on these results. But the saddest thing for Jeb Bush is that I think he has missed what the political moment is. He believes that it's the model where you demonstrate that you're responsible and you're calm and you can work with the other side. And Republicans are so frustrated about what Obama has done, the contraception mandate, Obamacare, the Iran nuclear deal, everything he has done that's been so outrageous. They are not in a mood to just gently put your hand out to the other side. They want to slap that hand on the other side, and they want us to take our country back.
Bernie Sanders is moving ahead of Hillary Clinton exponentially. It's growing by the day. In New Hampshire, which could really imperil her and wound her coming out. Did you ever imagine we'd see this? But it seems it's the same electorate. They don't want an insider.
Raymond, I was in a coffee shop in Iowa, my wife and I. Hillary Clinton came in to campaign on Election Day, and she came in and out of that coffee shop. She probably shook 3 hands and took 2 pictures. Most of the people she never talked to. She is a dreadful and a miserable candidate. She might be a good woman, I don't know her, but as far as a candidate, she lacks some serious skills. I think her husband got all the skills in that relationship.
He was amazing. I covered that White House. I need to talk about a 3-man race. Let's face it. What we're probably looking at here is Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz. In that race, how do things progress as we move into the southern states? Look, I witnessed myself these Trump rallies. Thousands of people waiting outside of coliseums in Mississippi and Alabama. Thousands. I've never seen anything like it. And I would just drove by. It was amazing to watch. What impact does that kind of phenomenon have on the party? And secondly, does it allow Donald Trump to say, You want Washington? You want a one-term senator again? There they are.
That's right.
You want somebody who's going to change things and kick over the tables? Here I am.
That's exactly right. And what we have to learn first is this energy, this enthusiasm for Donald Trump. This is a great thing for the Republican Party. There are more eyeballs on our process and on these debates and in everything that's happening on television and in the newspaper and everywhere else than we've ever seen. And what the party is making a mistake in doing is saying it's bad. Who are these people, these sometime Republicans coming into our party and trying to boss us around, who our nominees should be? We should be embracing these voters. This is how a party expands. They come in on a couple of issues they care about, and they want more, and they learn, and that's what we need for our party.
SCHLAPP, thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Raymond.
We'll have you back. When we return, Dr. WALID PHARES joins me to discuss the fight with ISIS and whether the U.S. could be unwittingly funding their efforts. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. My next guest is an advisor to the Anti-Terrorism Caucus of the House of Representatives. As the president meets with American Muslims and the EU recognizes the ISIS atrocities as genocide, we try to make sense of it all. Joining us on set is Dr. WALID PHARES. Thank you for coming back to the show, my friend.
Thank you.
Let's start with this EU Parliament. Now, you were on the show last time, and you said what?
I said, Raymond, this is going to happen. I hope it's not going to take too long of a time. It did, but it did happen.
It was submitted to the EU Parliament.
It was submitted originally as of 2014 by a federation of NGOs representing, if you recall, the Middle East Christians and the Yazidis, some of whom were on your show.
Yes.
And finally, you know, it's an organization of 27 nations. It took some time for that to be recognized, but that's a good thing because this is an international organization, European Parliament. Hopefully Congress will follow suit, and hopefully the United Nations will be the one to declare it officially under international law as a genocide. That will have consequences. It's just a long time before.
Well, yeah, what took them so long? I mean, we've had crucifixions, you've had beheadings, and we should update people. What's happening in Syria? What's happening in Iraq right now?
Well, Syria is a violence uncontrolled. You have the Syrians back in Assad, Hezbollah, backing them, trying to take back the Sunni areas. And then you have the Turks backing those who are more moderate Islamist, Muslim Brotherhood militias. And then you have the Kurds and the Christians allied in the northeastern part. And then you have us backing all sorts of unvetted people and not very successful, unfortunately.
And the peace talks broke down this week. The Syrian peace talks, those are over.
I don't think they are really peace talks. These are just talks while action is taking place on the ground.
Yeah, I want to play something for you, and this is a predicate for the latest infusion of cash into the region by the United States. This is Secretary of State John Kerry. Now, here he's talking about the $150 billion donation, if you will, that was part of the Iran nuke deal. Listen to this, and then we'll tell you what happened this week.
I think that some of it will end up in the hands of the IRGC or of other entities, some of which are labeled terrorist. You know, to some degree, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every component of that can be prevented.
Now we learned this week $900 million in so-called humanitarian aid going to the region. Are you confident that this money will actually reach the Christians, the Yazidis, these other minorities who are in such desperate straits?
I am not confident just because the representatives of the Middle East Christians, both in Syria and in Iraq, and the Yazidis, and even the representatives of moderate Muslims are telling us, they're telling Congress, basically, they're not getting that support. Those who are getting the support are the partners of the administration, and most of whom are linked to the Muslim Brotherhood or close to the Iranian regime, unfortunately.
Well, it's unbelievable. I want to talk about al-Shabaab. This is a group very active in Africa, and they're moving all over Africa. We saw in Somalia, in the capital, a plane blown up the other day. We see in this Kenyan coastal village, a Christian town, just people raised, raped. I mean, horrors going on. What of al-Shabaab? Why aren't we hearing more about it? And is this the next ascendant jihadi cell, if you will, in this part of the world?
Raymond, it's one of the many. We have been discussing this forever, you and I, and other shows as well. Al-Shabaab is linked to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has branches in Africa. ISIS has branches in North Africa, and in the middle, in between that other monster, quote unquote, of the Nigerian jihadist organization of Boko Haram. Africa is in total chaos right now, and it's not on our priority list, unfortunately.
No, it's unbelievable. The Custis for the Holy Land, Father Pizzaballa, Pier Battista Pizzaballa, made a statement this week urging Christians in these regions, in the entire Middle East and Africa, stay where you are. Do not migrate. We need you there. ISIS cannot take control. These Muslims cannot take control if you are in place. How wise is that? And then I want to go on to the second part of his statement.
Well, basically, this should have been the wise policy. Again, it's coming very much late in the process. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I used to go to Congress and then urge Congress to help the Christians where they were, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, elsewhere. Now you have an ISIS threat. If we have a policy, a U.S. policy, to support free protected areas, then be it.
That's where they'd have to go until they can come back home, because their infrastructure is shot. I mean, there's no water. The church is gone. Their hospitals are gone. They don't have food. I mean, people don't understand the gravity of this that you and I are hearing from the ground and the people who keep going back and forth trying to bring the aid in. Pizzaballa also said he urged moderate Muslims to look closely at their theology and to have a conversation within Islam. He said, it is clearly a deviation from your teaching, but there are links to established theology at play here. Is he right?
Look, where he is right is that there should be a debate. Where he is right is that we should support the moderates, not just in the theological battlefield. That's going to take a long time, 20 years, 30 years. But there are people rising in Egypt against the Brotherhood, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Lebanon, the Cedars Revolution. These are the Muslim moderate forces that the West needs to support. And I mean by the West, you know, not NGOs, the administration and the European Union.
I mentioned this earlier with Ted Cruz, the president coming back home. He spoke to a mosque in Baltimore. This mosque has some interesting ties to terror. They were under surveillance by the FBI for a number of years. I want to share this comment and get your reaction.
Have never visited a mosque. And the very word itself, Islam, comes from salam, peace. The standard greeting is, assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. And like so many faiths, Islam is rooted in a commitment to compassion and mercy. As Muslim Americans, you also have another concern, and that is your entire community so often is targeted or blamed for the violent acts of the very few.
Your reaction to these comments?
President Obama going to visit mosques or churches or any temples or religious sites is a good thing. The problem with this visit is twofold. Number one, he did not designate, and that was a huge opportunity for him to tell this Muslim American audience that jihadism is a threat, that you should be rising against jihadism, as President Sisi has said, as the president of Tunisia has said, as the king of Jordan has said. That was a first failure. The second failure, he did not bring with him the representatives of the moderate Muslims, the NGOs like Zuhdi Jasser and other forces that are pushing back against the Brotherhood. He could have done that, and that would have been I would have had a very positive reaction.
He did say, and I have to quote this, he said, it is undeniable that a small faction of Muslims propagate a perverted interpretation of Islam. This is the truth. It's real. It's there. So he did say that.
He said that there is a group, but what was the ideology? That the ideology is about the caliphate, that the ideology is about dividing the world into. He needs to tell the young Muslims that what you're hearing from the jihadists is wrong. It's not that the jihadists are just wrong.
Let's talk about a final thing here. The Pope gave a very high-profile interview to the Asia Times this week. In it, he praised China. He said China is the future. It's a model of wisdom. He also said the world need not fear a growing China. Some are criticizing the Pope because there was no mention of human or religious rights and oversight, or is he trying to break through the Great Wall here and gain access to China so he can reach those people who are suffering?
I think he's badly advised because he has made similar statements on other issues. Where is John Paul II? When he met with Lech Walesa, when he met with Solidarity Movement, he also was talking to the leaders of the world, but at the same time he gave them visibility. That's what the Pope should be doing with regard to China and any other country around the world. Talk about and talk with the dissidents first.
Interesting point. Yeah. Well, and you know, there have been reports that came in the wake of this. A priest being taken. We have bishops who are under arrest, house arrest and otherwise. Some of them have just vanished. And there's real concern that Hong Kong, which was always kind of the Western protected enclave, and when they remerged back with mainland China, they were guaranteed nothing's going to change. It looks like everything's about to change for them.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. WALID PHARES, always a pleasure. Thank you so for being here. We will check in with you. WALID PHARES' latest book, The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid. It's still available at bookstores everywhere. And had you read it when it first came out, it was practically prophetic. So ahead of the ball here. It's amazing. I also want to remind you about the new book from Mother Angelica, Praying with Mother Angelica. It's meditations on the Rosary, the Way of the Cross, and other prayers. It's available now through the EWTN Religious Catalog. It's a collection of those mini books, some of her writings from the 70s, and it's a wonderful companion to the personal prayers and devotions of Mother Angelica that I edited for, that have, you know, the more personal things that she wrote. The companion of those two books, I think, will complete her prayers, her devotions in a way that perhaps you haven't seen before. So that's available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. That is all the time we have until next week. The show continues on Facebook, on Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Now, don't miss next week. I have an exclusive interview with actor Joseph Fiennes about his new film, Risen. Something to see. And I'll be telling you, well, I'll be sharing something with you that's very special. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.